There's a word that comes up constantly in Catholic studies, in the Bible, and basically in any serious conversation about what Christianity actually is. The word is covenant. And I want to talk about what it actually means, not the textbook version, the real version. Because once you understand what a covenant is, a huge amount of the Bible suddenly makes sense in a way it probably hasn't before. So first, what is it? A covenant is an agreement, but it's not like a contract. A contract is, I do this and you do that. Covenant is different. A covenant creates a relationship, a permanent one. Two parties commit to each other and agree to do things together going forward. You actually already know what a covenant looks like in real life. Marriage is a covenant. It's not, I'll cook dinner if you pay rent. It's, I am committing myself to you as a person, permanently, and we're going to face whatever comes together. And if you're growing up here in Saskatchewan, you've grown up on treaty territory. And those treaties, they're also covenants. They're not just legal arrangements about the land. They were meant to be defining relationships, commitments between nations to do life together. And that distinction matters, and it matters enormously when we're talking about the Bible. Here's something worth sitting with for a second. God doesn't need to make a covenant with anyone. Think about what that means. If you believe in God at all, a being that is eternal, all-powerful, the source of everything that exists, that being has zero needs. He doesn't need our worship. He doesn't need our obedience. He doesn't need anything. And this is actually a massive distinction between the God of the Bible and the gods of basically every other ancient culture the Israelites were surrounded by. In other ancient religions, gods were powerful but needy. Humanity was often created specifically to serve the gods, to feed the gods, work for them, keep them happy. The gods ruled and humanity obeyed. The God of the Bible does something completely different. He offers a covenant. He asks. He waits for a response. He actually respects human freedom enough to let people say no. That's not a small thing. It's actually a pretty radical idea. So where does this covenant show up? Well, all over the Bible, but let's start with one of the most important moments. Moses, Egypt, the Exodus. When God shows up to act on behalf of his people, they are slaves. And not just economically disadvantaged or politically marginalized. In the eyes of Egyptian society and law, they are not even considered people. They are property. They are things. There's a moment in the story where Pharaoh orders the killing of the Israelite baby boys. And the way the story describes his thinking, it basically has the same logic as cleaning out a closet. There's too many of these. Let's get rid of them. That's how little these lives mattered to the most powerful man in the world. And God's response to this is very telling. He doesn't immediately destroy Egypt. He doesn't immediately free the slaves. He starts by giving Pharaoh chances to change. The 10 plagues aren't just a demonstration of power. They're escalating invitations. Each one is essentially God saying, look at what you're doing. Look at who these people are. Change your mind. Treat them like human beings. Pharaoh doesn't. And so eventually, God completely dismantles the most powerful empire on earth to free people who had absolutely nothing to offer. Then something really important happens. After the Israelites are out of Egypt, free, standing at the edge of the desert, God doesn't immediately hand them commandments. At Mount Sinai, he asks them what they want to do. He essentially says, you're free now. You can go your own way if you want. Or you can continue in this relationship, the one that started when I came for you when you had nothing. And the Israelites say yes, as free people, voluntarily. They choose the covenant. And that sequence is crucial. God restores dignity first. He gives freedom first. And then he asks, would you like to be in relationship? God never uses someone's desperation as leverage. That's not what the covenant is built on. Now, fast forward about 400 years. The Israelites are free and in their promised land, but things aren't going well. There's no real unity, there's no shared direction. People are just doing their own thing. And as the book of Judges describes it, it's leading to chaos. So they ask God for a king. And specifically, they ask for a king like the nations around them have. If you read between the lines of that request, what they're really asking for is a strong man, someone powerful and forceful who will get everyone in line. They're basically asking for a pharaoh, which, given everything God did in their history to free them from a pharaoh, is kind of ironic. God hears the request, but what he has in mind is something different. Not a ruler who dominates, but a king who guides and protects. His first attempt, King Saul, doesn't work out, so God starts over. And the person he chooses is not what anyone expected. He picks David. He's the youngest son. He's so overlooked in his own family that when a prophet comes to anoint the next king and asks to meet all of Jesse's sons, David isn't even brought in from the field at first. His own father doesn't even think to mention him. David's job is shepherd, out in the wilderness, alone. It's not glamorous, but out there, David has developed something that none of his older brothers have: real trust in God. Not performative trust, not religious obligation, actual dependence on God, tested in real conditions, completely away from any audience who might approve of him. And that's what God is looking for. God works through David to make him king. God gives him victory over his enemies. God raises him from a forgotten youngest son to the ruler of a unified nation. And then God makes a promise. Through David's descendants, an everlasting kingdom. David doesn't ask for this. God offers it. Now, David eventually gets comfortable, stops trusting, stops going to battle, and he sins. He sins real bad. But here's what's interesting. God doesn't cancel the covenant because David sinned. God makes things right. There are real consequences. But the relationship continues. And David, when confronted with what he's done, doesn't make excuses. He goes back to God and asks for a new heart. The Bible is pretty clear on this point. God is willing to stay in relationship with people who fail. Maybe especially with people who fail, as long as they're honest about it. After David, Israel's history gets darker. The kings that follow gradually become exactly what God warned against. They're corrupt, they're self-serving. The poor get exploited, the vulnerable get ignored. And at certain points, the kings of Israel are doing the same thing Pharaoh did. Which raises an uncomfortable question. God freed these people from Egypt specifically because of that kind of injustice. And now they're doing it to each other. What does God do with that? The same thing he did with Pharaoh. He sends messages through the prophets. People whose job is essentially to show up and tell the powerful that they're wrong and they need to change. These prophets are not popular. They're persecuted, shut down, ignored. Eventually, the kingdom collapses. The Jewish people are taken into exile. The temple is destroyed. And for them, this feels like the end of everything. The covenant is broken. The relationship is over. But the prophets keep speaking. And what they say is this: God doesn't quit. What is coming isn't the end of the covenant. It's a transformation of it. A new covenant. One that won't be limited to one nation or one people. One that will extend to everyone, all nations, and all people. And at the center of this new covenant, God's law won't be an external set of rules that people struggle to follow. It'll be written on their hearts. Something internal. Something that guides people from the inside. That idea, a new universal internal covenant, is what the prophets are pointing toward. And for Christians, it's exactly what they believe shows up in Jesus. But that's an ongoing conversation. So to summarize, covenant. It's not a contract, it's a relationship. It's one that God initiates, that respects human freedom, that lifts up the people that everyone else ignores, and that even when it's broken, God keeps choosing to restore. That's the thread running through Moses, David, and the prophets. And it's the thread the whole Bible is built on.